In this video, we're going to go over some of the layout principles in UX. And obviously there's a lot more than I can cover in just one video, but we're just going to hit on a few basic things to remember. So firstly, let's talk about the corners again. Content should be placed in a very deliberate way. And in particular, you should think about your content as almost like targets that your audience is trying to hit. So your user is trying to move this mouse. This is their their arrow or whatever, and they're trying to hit it on certain targets. So for example, if I want them to get started with our wine delivery service, I want to have that as a nice big bright button centrally located, right? Same with the corners of the screen. You'll notice that in most operating systems, like up here and over here, the important information is placed in the upper left-hand corner and on the bottom corners of the screen. This is because whenever it comes to mouse dexterity, and we mentioned this in another video, but I'm going to go over it again, it's much easier to kind of knock your mouse all the way to a corner and then readjust than to very precisely find a spot on your screen. So for example, if I want to close something, I just move my mouse in that general direction and then readjust it to hit the X button. Right? This is something that we unconsciously do because we're so used to computers and to mouse interfaces. But some people still struggle with this, so it's important to keep that in mind, that important information should really be in the upper left, upper right, or lower left, lower right hand corners of the screen. So that's why we put nav bars in the upper left hand corner, or sign in the upper right hand corner. Whenever people look at kind of visual maps of how people read web pages, they typically start left to right, which makes sense for our culture. And then they'll read down, and they kind of do a big F shape. They talk about this as the F shape. This website perfectly encapsulates that. So it has this line up here, and then a line right here, and then there's kind of a visual line drawing you down. So this is a big F shape for your eyes to follow. I would definitely try and use that within your designs. So the next principle we're going to talk about is the anchored navigation. And you'll see this on a lot of websites. Anchored elements are elements that have a CSS property that basically keeps them in a certain place on your screen as you scroll. So notice that navigation bar is like stuck to the top of my screen. It's anchored up there. Really important things like navigation, you usually want to anchor. Same with like cookie notifications or other maybe even subscribe notifications. You want to anchor those to a good definitive spot on their screen. Let's look at Zendesk's approach to this. They have a really nice one where they have this kind of register now thing, and as I scroll, it sort of pops this into the top of the screen. There's also a nice sense of depth here with that drop shadow, but we're not going to talk about that now. Bottom right hand corner of the screen, we have an anchored contact sales button. So we always have that ability to email the sales team at any time as we're scrolling around. Now, on a lot of news sites, you'll see that the anchor disappears. This is because they're supposed to be read more like a newspaper. Amazon also lacks an anchoring point just because it's essentially, people are so used to how Amazon works that they're not going to really change their layout now. Now the next point I want to talk about is grids. And we've talked about this a lot in design literacy and in intro to web design, but grids are a great way to keep information organized. Right now we're kind of using a 2-column system here. So we have a column over here and a column over here, and our eyes just kind of do this zigzag back and forth. We move to a single column, then we break down to 3 columns, right? Then we break down to 3, and then we might expand that a little bit. But notice everything is in a kind of grid. Everything is in a consistent grid pattern. We're not doing a lot of sort of crazy stair-stepping or anything like that. We're not readjusting this. We're not having these all off-center. They're all aligned evenly in a grid. This is a carousel, which is kind of inherently a giant grid that we're moving around. Let's look at Zendesk's website. We have the same kind of system. We move from one type of grid to another type of grid, but it just keeps everything consistent and everything straight and easy to follow. Newspapers are just one giant grid, right? Amazon, same type of system. We have these kind of little blocks of information that we can scroll through. Lastly, I want to talk about the call to action, right? We've talked about this concept again and again and again. The call to action is our goal, what we want them to reach in our website, what we want them to do. In the case of Wink, we want them to sign up. So what do we do with that? Well, our sign up button looks nothing like our other buttons, right? These get started buttons look totally different from these nav buttons. Zendesk, same situation. The get started button and the view demo button look totally different from the other buttons here. Our eyes are immediately drawn to these different things. The call to action on BBC News is to simply read their content, so they're not really worried too much about that. Amazon, their sign-in button, which is what they want you to do and then purchase goods, big identifiable button. All right, so think about your call to action always and how you want to situate that on a screen. Those are really the basics of layout. We're going to get really deep into this in other classes, but for now I just want you to have those in mind as you're designing your website.